Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this Q&A webinar for course 31 of the Australian Rural Leadership Program. I just want to start by acknowledging country. I'm here on Ngunnawal and Ngambri country in Canberra, but wherever you may be seated or standing, I just want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the country that you're on, and recognise what we're standing on is and always will be Aboriginal land, and pay my respects to their old people and their future generations as well. A real opportunity today for us to get together, for you to ask the questions that you may have in relation to this particular program, and we'll get to some of that later on. We'll also talk a bit about the foundation itself, and the ARLP, and the process application process that you might go through. Andrea will also chime in and talk to us a bit about the program structure and methodology. And we're fortunate to have three members of our alumni with us today. So it's Stu Crosswaite from course 26, Melinda McCrone from course 28, and Catherine Chicken from course 28. And so they'll reflect a bit on some of their experiences as well as participants on the program and be part of the Q&A process. Thanks, Harley. So just about the foundation, in case you didn't know, the foundation is a for-purpose, not-for-profit organisation. We're in our 31st year. We are a leadership development organisation, and our focus is 100% in and around and on rural, regional and remote Australia. So that's part of why we exist, is about a thriving rural and regional remote Australia. So we run a range of different leadership programs around the country. Some of those are national programs like this one, and some are place-based and programs, so working within regions in particular. So this program, of course, the Australian Rural Leadership Program, is our flagship program, and it remains the most in-depth experiential leadership development program in the country, full stop. And as I said, we just celebrated 30 years. We're in our 31st year this year, and what we're talking about course 31 right now. Thanks, Hayley. In terms of alumni, I think it might be over 2,600 now, but anyway, certainly over 2,500 alumni. You can see there on the map, they're in, virtually anywhere people are in rural and regional remote Australia, right around the country. And those people come from a whole range of backgrounds. And remembering this program is a diverse program in terms of people, their backgrounds, where they're coming from, what they're doing. And that could be community organisations, through to commercial organisations. It could be government, local government and regional development, the arts, health, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities, and everything in between. So diversity is key here, and that reflects our network of graduates as well. And those people, of course, are making a contribution, both individually and through networks, right throughout Australia in terms of their leadership. Thanks, Harley. I guess I mentioned before that the Australian Rural Leadership Program is our flagship program. It's our longest program in terms of the number of days and therefore the commitment that we're seeking from individuals here. It's the fullest expression of experiential learning that we provide as an opportunity for people. And so all of those things are important to bear in mind if you're interested in undertaking this program. We also know that this program is for experienced leaders. So if someone's just starting off on their leadership pathway, this is probably not the program for them. It's not to say you have to have 30 years of experience under your belt, but you do have to have some experience, leadership experience, to get the most out of and give the most to this program. So that's another thing just to bear in mind. It is a challenge-based experiential learning. What does that mean? Well, in essence, we designed this program to put a range of different experiences in front of a cohort of around 30 people. Now, people might find those experiences everything from exhilarating to deeply uncomfortable and everything in between. And we do that purposefully to provide some challenge to you as a participant. Now, that might be physical, mental, emotional, or otherwise. The point is that you are challenged and therefore you, from that challenge, get to gain a deeper understanding. You have the opportunity to gain a deeper understanding of yourself and your own behaviours as a starting point for learning. So that's what I mean by challenge-based and experiential learning. As I said, we do design these unique immersive experiences, and obviously throughout the program, through those 4 sessions, they will look quite different to each other as you go through that process as well. Importantly, they are delivered in real world context. In other words, we really minimise any essence of classroom-based learning. That is, you sitting in a room, us spitting out some information to you and hoping that you can consume some of that. This is about real world experiences. And so you're active in your own learning as part of this program. Importantly, we do that also so to provide an opportunity for you as a learner and you as a participant to become more adaptive in the face of change and where that leads to in terms of you individually and collectively working with others to overcome challenge in the pursuit of the greater good, whatever that looks like for you. Thanks, Harley. In terms of the commitment, and this is really important, we're talking about a 4-session program over a 15-month period. Now, each of those sessions, and there's a bit more detail in this presentation and indeed online, is somewhere between that sort of 6 and 12 or 13 days of face-to-face per session. And again, people might ask, why so long and why so many sessions? So it's the same thing I talked about earlier on. If we want to maximise the opportunity for you to develop in terms of your behavioural awareness and then your ability to choose to change your behaviours in terms of your leadership, and then to the next part of that, which is the building of social intelligence. In other words, the way in which you interact with other people, you support other people to act, you influence them in one way, shape or form, then having the length of time and being able to go into an environment where you develop a deep level of trust in a cohort of people who were perfect strangers not so long ago, and be able to lean into that and go back into your real world context and try to put your leadership in that sense into action and come back to that group again. If you can do that multiple times, that will start to, it offers the most opportunity for you to cement in that learning in terms of behavioural change, in terms of building of social intelligence. So we're asking for that commitment of time. And strangely, as an ex-participant myself, and someone said this to me before I did the program, I didn't know what they were talking about. And I said, this is a lot of time. And that participant said to me, yes, Matt, it's a lot of time. And in the end, it will find you some time in terms of your approach to the world, the way you prioritize, all of that sort of thing. And that person was right. There is some additional time in between those sessions for your own learning, online learning and project work. I wouldn't call any of that onerous. We're not, it's not an MBA in that sense, and you're constantly, working away at night. This is not what it's about. We prioritize the time you spend on program and with other participants. That's our priority. And that's the basis of experiential learning. And there is some commitment out of that time, but I wouldn't call it onerous. There's also a commitment to your sponsors. Somebody, as you can see there, is putting up around $60,000 for you to participate on this program. So we do expect some commitment from you in both reporting and in whatever way you can to give back to the person or the sponsor who's provided you this opportunity. Importantly, there is a participant contribution of, we say there, of $5,500. And when you look at the total cost of the scholarship, you know, in our view, that's pretty good value in terms of your commitment to yourself as part of that. Those locations, as I said, are around regional and rural and remote Australia. And there is one of those sessions is an international session as well. Thanks, Harley. You can go to this and get and have a look at your own leisure on the website as to what the process looks like over that period. But essentially, as you can see there, in June 2024, there's a 12-day program in regional New South Wales. There's then an online workshop, which is just a very short one, a 90-minute workshop in August. In September, another online workshop, which is around communication and diversity. And then you move to the second face-to-face experience, which will be in New Zealand. And that's a 10-day session in October 2024. Another webinar around international leadership in December, and an online workshop on creative thinking in March 2025. You then go into your networks and affiliation session, which is 6 days in regional Victoria. There's then an online workshop and masterclasses going for 2 days. Now, this is a part of the program where you get to choose some elective streams depending on your own needs and how you want to contribute to your organisation, your industry, your community. And that'll take place in June 2025. And the final session, face-to-face, is 10 days in Central Australia, and that's around influence and impact in August 2025. Again, you can look at this information at your own leisure on the website. This is just giving you a quick overview. Thanks, Hayley. And I'll hand over now to Andrea, who's our Director of Learning, to talk about program structure and methodology. Thanks, Andrea.
Thanks, Matt. Hi, everybody. I'd also like to acknowledge that I'm on Ngunnawal Ngambri country this morning, or today, and welcome you all to the webinar. Matt's gone over a little bit about some of the operational elements of the Australian Rural Leadership Program. And so I thought I might just pick up, he mentioned a couple of times their experiential learning. So Hayley, the next slide is a little bit of a visual representation for you around how you might feel if you are a participant in an Australian Rural Leadership Foundation program and you are primarily undertaking your learning and your development through experiential methodology. So if you're not familiar with that, essentially, if you think back to all of those times when you went through school or perhaps university and you sat in a classroom, or even you might have been virtually in a classroom in most recent years because of COVID, and the attention is pretty much focused always at the person standing perhaps at the front of the room, and that is the person who is the teacher, the facilitator, the trainer. So that's a familiar experience for a lot of us. That's a sort of a fairly typical environment for some of us to have undertaken our learning. When you undertake learning that's experiential, it's nothing like that. So the focus is at no point on the teacher, the trainer, or the facilitator. The focus is always on the learner. So learning is at the heart of everything that is put into the design for the learner. And the other significant difference in experiential learning is that it's acknowledged that experience counts as knowledge. Experience is powerful in terms of creating knowledge for people in the same way as they can be taught theories or facts or data or algorithms or formulas or any of those kinds of things. Experience is also an important foundation for creating our own knowledge. And it's in fact our lived experience that counts. Then we go on and try to apply some of the things that we have been developing. So this little diagram there is the little blue person at the top there, of course, is the individual in that broader circle. And at all times, the individual is part of a cohort. So learning is fundamentally a social activity. It's best undertaken when you have the interaction with peers and that you can learn from and with others. So you're always working in groups of other people. We don't focus so much on people as individuals. Whilst people come in with their own individual objectives, we're actually really looking at you as an individual and how you interact with your immediate world, your context, your environment, and the people that are operating in that with you. We encourage people to ask lots of questions. So hence the question mark there in the bubble, because another part of experiential learning is you have to lose your attachment to knowing everything, and you have to become more curious about what you don't know. So curiosity is important, asking questions is really important, and looking at things in different ways to the ways that you would normally look at the world. One of the things we're trying to get people in our programs to do is understand how they construct meaning. How do I come to think the way that I do? Why do I do this? And when you know that, then you can actually make some decisions as to whether you're consciously going to continue to do that or you're going to make some adaptations to what you're doing and thinking. We love innovation and experimentation, and we actually think it's important that people try things, innovate, prototype, fail at them, work out that that doesn't work. I need to think of something different, because in the real world of complex adaptive challenges in which leadership has to operate, nobody ever lands the solution in one go. And in fact, in some instances, there is no clear solution. So experimentation and questioning are really important. And the other little bubble there is about conversations. Conversations matter. They're important. They allow us to understand how we negotiate our position and how we can explore with empathy the position and ideas of other people. So what we do know about in our cohorts is when people come together in cohorts, it is very common for people to say that they are now meeting people for the very first time. There are some people in this mix in a cohort that ordinarily they never ever would come into contact with, and they really value the different perspectives that these people are bringing. And you can only learn more about people when you sit and you talk and you listen deeply to what is being said. So if you think that sounds like something that you would be really interested in undertaking, and that you want to intentionally develop as a person and in your leadership, then this is possibly the program for you. And I'd just like to reiterate a couple of things that Matt mentioned before. Because of the nature of the methodology and how you undertake your learning in this program, your attendance at each of the sessions is absolutely essential. This isn't a program where you can ask somebody else for the notes, or you can go and look at a few YouTube videos and you can catch up on what everybody else did whilst they were on a program. It's not the nature of this program to be that way. So your ability and your availability to commit to the time for this program is really, really important. And if this isn't the right time coming into course 31, then don't worry. Lots of people actually come back and reapply for other years if they don't get into the program the first time. So I just think make assessments about whether this is your time. Is this my time, before you consider whether you're going to put in an application or not. Thanks, Hayley. This slide just really relates to a little bit more about what I mentioned before, and Matt talked about it. There'll be lots of opportunities to step out of your comfort zone, challenge yourself and to challenge other people. You'll do most of your intentional development once you are able to move out of comfort and out of security and move more into the learning zone. These are just 5 areas of our program design, and all throughout the design, as I mentioned before, all of the design is about the learning, not information that's transmitted to you or conveyed to you, or a set of content that you have to learn and you have to be assessed on later. There are just 5 rolling parts of our design where you'll always be encouraged and challenged to remain curious, challenge yourself, think of new ideas, work on your relationships with others, and then really importantly, persist. Just continue to develop. And as Matt said, it's over a long period of time, and that's why we put that amount of time so that you can put it into practice. Thanks, Haley. So now I believe Matt is going to be hosting a conversation with some of our lovely alumni.
Yeah, thanks, Andrea. And folks, you know, any questions that you might have, we'd love to hear those as well. I'm just going to ask these guys a few opening questions, and really over to you. Whatever's on your mind, you want to ask any of them or any of us about those questions, we'll be ready for them as well. So thanks, Stu, Melinda, and Catherine for joining us. I'd like to start just by getting a sense from each of you, if I can, really about what those, I guess those highlights were for you. You know, you've been through the program. You know, what's top of mind for you about that experience? What it meant to you, what it meant in terms of your leadership, just as a starting point for the conversation. So, Catherine, would you like to go first?
Thanks, Matt. I guess I got an enormous amount out of this program. I knew very little about it when I went into it, so I'm one of those people who went in a little bit green, but it was probably the most transformative thing I've done in my life, certainly the most positive and impactful learning experience I've ever had. And I think the really wonderful thing for me was, as Matt mentioned earlier, you get to interact with people you wouldn't normally come in contact with necessarily in your own lives. And so there's a whole group of new best friends, which have been really important in my life going forward, and particularly that connection, the deep relationships you develop have been really impactful for me. And I'd just also like to say that, you know, a lot of us went into this thinking, you know, well, why am I a leader? I don't feel like a leader. Leadership comes in lots and lots of forms. And so be prepared to go into the unknown with an open heart and open mind. And this time can be really transformative. It certainly was for me.
Yeah, thanks, Catherine. I should have mentioned, maybe just if you can share with everyone here just a little bit about you, so they get a sense of where you've come from into that experience, would be great. Thanks, mate.
Sure. I'm a vet from the Upper Hunter in Wanneroo country. I'm actually currently, should be saying kia ora to you. I'm sitting looking at the Hauraki Gulf in Aotearoa, New Zealand. But I'm a horse vet from the Upper Hunter in New South Wales. So that's where I fit in. I've been there a long time, made my life with my husband and children in Scone. And I was sponsored onto the program with AgriFutures, where I do some work in an advisory panel capacity for the thoroughbred horse industry.
Right, thanks for sharing some of that. Stu, would you like to introduce yourself and just reflect on that question? Thanks.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks, Matt. Yeah, so Stuart Crosswaite, I'm a dairy farmer, 5th generation dairy farmer on my family farm in the Kiewa Valley in northeast Victoria. I had no ambition whatsoever of ever being a farmer, let alone a dairy farmer. And I went off to uni and ended up working in the dairy industry one way or another, I went full circle and realized that there was an opportunity on the family farm, and here I am 20 years later. I've been running the farm after a small career sort of consulting in the industry. So the reason I put my hand up for an application to join the program was that I think in leadership roles in whatever industry you're in, you sometimes get tapped on the shoulder because you're doing good things and you're productive, you're innovative on your farm or whatever you're doing, and you don't necessarily see yourself as a leader. And so that was me to a T. I'd learned all this stuff at uni. I'd seen good farms and bad farms, and I wanted to apply it at home, and I did. And we've grown the farm quite a lot, but being involved in some leadership things, again, I was doing lots of great things, but there wasn't anyone following. And we were doing good things on the farm as well, but to grow your farm, you need people. And I wasn't, to be honest with you, we were turning people over. And I think the biggest things I got out of doing the program was that the first thing you have to do to be a leader, I think, is to understand yourself a bit better, and before you can lead others. And I think that's probably the greatest thing I got out of it, was a real inward look at myself. And I think for a big part of it, Matt, I was probably a bit negative to myself about the flaws that I had. And probably by the end of the program, I started to appreciate the positives that I had as a personality. And so, really drawing on those positives, but working on your negatives was a big thing for me. Matt, I think you mentioned a deep level of trust in the cohorts. I'd have to reiterate that. I think it's an amazingly unique learning environment. And for me, I was amazed, night 2 around the campfire, people were crying and opening up about deep things. And I thought, wow, this is a unique space. And it really is the conversations that you can have, not only throughout the not only throughout the program, but with your cohort and various groups that you get involved in within the program. You can really draw on that professionally and when you're out in your workplace. And it's not only a great program when you're in it, but afterwards you've got an amazing resource to call on. And I don't think there's really a day that goes by that I don't think about something that happened on the program. I wrote down here while you were talking, Matt, it's really hard to visualize what Matt's describing to you without being part of it. And what they're saying is real. It really is. It is a unique experience. It's the experiential learning is a great way to learn. You're really learning off everyone around you. And again, just to say what I said before, it's a really safe space, and you can really test yourself with things. Sorry, I'll stop in a sec. I'm rambling a bit, but I'm a quite a strong character. I like to get things done. I don't really praise people, and I learnt to improve on that. But to be able to get tested by people that are around you in a really safe environment, it's pretty cool. So I'd highly recommend anyone, if you want to improve yourself and you want to get better outcomes from the people around you, have a crack. It's good.
Good on you, Stu, and thanks for sharing that, and don't apologise for for what you wanted to share, which is great. And you're right. The words can roll off my tongue in terms of what we're trying to do here. It is hard to explain. To be honest, it is hard to explain unless you're in it and part of it. But just know, I guess, from each of you who are thinking about this, that you'd be up for a different experience and form of learning. That's the first thing. The second thing is, as in the name, that experiential learning approach, you can expect a range of experiences to be put in front of you, and how you enter into those, both in terms of yourself and your own behaviours, what you learn from that interaction, and how you both support, challenge, and influence others as part of that process, will all become part of it. In the end, this is a leader. Our focus is on leadership, not on leaders, if that makes sense. So leadership is a practice, and we, as we go into the program, we explore this in obviously a lot more depth. But how do you improve the practice of leadership, which is, yes, we recognise it's both individual and collective, but more so our focus is on eventually on the collective, and that's the leadership that is required, we believe, for rural and regional remote Australia, and indeed more broadly into the future. So I'll stop there and go to Mel, and if you could share a bit about yourself, Mel, and your own experience, that'd be great.
Sure, Matt. I live in Wiradjuri country down near Holbrook in New South Wales. We run a beef business, and I also am a lecturer in literacy studies at Charles Sturt University. So originally a primary school teacher, and I have a love of learning, and I entered the leadership program, I guess, for a couple of different reasons. I sit in a very unique position where my husband actually did the ARLP program, a couple of cohorts prior to me being accepted, and that was an incredible experience watching someone else go through a program such as this. And with my educational hat on, I watched this, the growth and the change in someone who was very close to, and it was incredible, the growth in my husband and the way he changed, in the way he managed large groups of individuals. And I guess I started thinking about it and thinking, you know, I'm, you know, a really big advocate in education, and I'd been running and trying to scrounge for funding to get programs off the ground. And I suddenly started to really think about myself as a leader. And, you know, with a little bit of prodding from my husband, he said, you should do this program. It would be amazing for you to actually experience what I have. And I think that would really help with the work that you do. So a little bit further about me, I do a lot of work, a lot of advocacy in the educational space. So designing programs, trying to get funding for different programs off the ground. And I think the greatest learning I have had from the program was understanding others, and really thinking about, there is so many different individuals in this world, and they all don't think like I do. Like Stuart, I'm a bit of a, right, I'll see something and I'll want to go and get it done. Not everyone's like that. A lot of other people might need details, you know, a lot of people work in different ways. And I think that my greatest learning, and I think the community has benefited from me being able to understand individuals who I come into contact with. And I'm far more proficient about understanding their perspectives, being curious about, you know, why they think a different way, or, you know, I'm, you know, very much less politicate, I suppose, and very much about understanding the other individuals who I come into contact with. And I think as a community member, that only is going to help and grow our communities that I live in. And I strongly encourage anyone who is thinking about participating on this program. I guess I was very reserved, thinking, oh my gosh, I don't think I deserve place on the program, I guess I didn't value myself as a leader. However, I now can see that there is, so I can have a huge impact in the community that I work within. And that impact is like a small ripple, you know, that can create big changes into the future. So if you're worried, you know, just, that's okay. So that's about it for me.
Good on you. Thanks, Mel. And I can see some questions starting to come through. We're going to get to those in just a minute. Thanks for those who are starting to send those through. We'll start addressing them. I'm just going to ask our panel one more question, then we'll just go straight to your Q&A. And that's really about how you manage the commitment. Folks, we're talking about, you know, 40 plus days over a 15-month period in an already busy life. And if you try and just do the simple maths and go, how am I going to find that number of days? Most of you will go, well, I can't. I just don't know how I can find it. And look, from my own experience, which not these guys are, you know, courses 26 and 28. I did course 7, so if that gives you an idea about how long ago that was, but I think it was 62 days for me back then. So the reality is, if you approach it that way, you might easily talk yourself out of it. In the end, it is about that commitment to self and others through your leadership, and really importantly, as these guys I'm sure will reflect on, you need to go into that knowing not only that you have the support of those around you. Now, I would always say it starts with family first, and then it's workplace or whatever is outside of that. But also importantly, you know, that you, as a, you know, whilst you're participating, are able to support others on the flip side as well. But I'll start with it. I have trouble calling Catherine because she's just known to everyone as Chook. So Chook, I'm going to start with you. Can you talk to us a bit about how you managed and juggled those commitments, and, you know, what that meant to you about home, work, and doing the course? Thanks. Chook.
Yeah, Matt, thanks. I guess I was at a time in my life, you know, there's a few grey hairs around here. My children were getting pretty independent, and so I embarked on this experience at a time in my life where I didn't have massive commitments to them on a day-to-day basis, I suppose. So in that regard, I was lucky because I was able to take myself out of that home and work environment. It's something that you do have to consider, and I think what Matt just said about getting the support of the people at home and in your workplace is really, really important, because it is a time commitment. And I know that for others within our cohort, it was much harder than it was for me because they were at different stages of their life. And our cohort was pretty affected by COVID. There was lots and lots of homeschooling going on at the same time as, you know, trying to do things on Zoom and all those sorts of things. That's changed for you going forward. But I think it's really important to understand that it is a time commitment. It's an immersive leadership and learning experience, so that you have to be prepared to immerse yourself in that time and give the time. And I think that's probably the most important thing that I got out of it. It was just, you pretty much have to put the other things aside as much as you possibly can whilst you are on program, and be in that space and be in that time. That's a huge privilege, and it's really, really valuable in doing that. So I think that's one of the best parts about the program. You are literally in that space, in that time, and we don't get to do that very much in any other parts of our lives anymore. So yeah, it is a time commitment. There's no doubt about that. And I think what Matt said earlier about just, is this the right time? Or it might have been Andrea, is this the right time for you? It's important to consider, is it the right time? And a lot of people that were on our cohort had applied multiple times. So it's something that, it's not, you know, you don't apply once and don't feel you can apply again, sort of thing. But yeah, there's lots to consider. It's an extraordinary experience, and just being able to put yourself in that time and space is very valuable.
Thanks, Chook. And yeah, really importantly, to dedicate that time, and we know that as part of the program, being sort of, at least for one part of that, being cut off from the outside world, we believe is pretty vital. You know, one of the key building blocks for your own leadership development is not just the extent to which you understand yourself and the drivers of your own behaviours, but really importantly, that you can start to move to a space where you can choose to change those behaviours over time without having been cut off from everything going on around you, and without being challenged. That your likelihood of getting there is a lot lower. And so this is why we designed the program in the way in which we do. We also understand how it might look to your loved ones and people around you as a little bit selfish. You know, I'm going to dedicate this time and I'm going to go and do these things. I'm going to be cut off from you. Really importantly, it's a leadership program. It's not a personal development program. Will you gain significant personal development and awareness from what you're doing? Absolutely, you will. And for something greater than yourself. So really importantly, part of that conversation is about the dedication of time so that you can give back to family, give back to workplace, give back to your sector or industry, whatever it happens to be. That's the point of it. The personal development in that, it doesn't start and stop with personal development, it goes beyond there. I think that's just an important thing to recognise. Stu, would you like to just reflect on what that meant, the balancing act for you and the commitment of time?
Yeah. I didn't mention in my intro that we're dairy farmers. We were part of the Murray Goulburn self-destruction when it collapsed, and the turmoil that followed with the collapse of Murray Goulburn and then Fonterra doing their clawbacks and all that stuff. A group of us got together, we formed our own cooperative, and so I've been kind of leading that. And so the time commitment is big, but I think one of the key things that you need to be as a leader is good at managing yourself and looking after yourself as well. So prior to the course, a lot of my days off were going to meetings, and I didn't really have much time for the family, let alone myself. So I think one of the biggest learnings I got out of it was to be able to better manage myself and get and lead others around me to take the pressure off myself, because I was one of those doing type people that was, you know, I had to be out the front, I had to be doing everything. But to be a good leader, you need to be bringing people with you. And so although it was tough probably in the first few sessions, I think by halfway through the program I had a much better structure at home. And like Catherine, you know, Melinda up at Holbrook there, I had the same sort of reaction from my wife as well. So, you know, not only do you get to manage yourself better, but there's a net result of having a happier family. And it is life-changing for yourself, but you know, the net benefit is you are better equipped to give back to your community and your industry, etc. So yeah, I think I've got a much better structure on the farm now. I can we've created our own set of values. So which is, I might just indulge you for 30 seconds on that, because, you know, prior to the course I would have thought that's a bit of fluff and, you know, why do we need to do that? But it is a unique little structure that I actually only facilitated it. The staff put it together themselves. So you can sort of see that I was being a leader by allowing them to rise up and not be knocked down by myself. So they built this set of values. It brings a third person into any conversation that you're having with someone. So yeah, we've tried to create a culture and an environment not on the farm, but also in the cooperative that we've formed. It's helped me be a better leader in that space. So yeah, that's probably enough.
Yeah, thanks, Stu. Appreciate that feedback. And Mel, if you'd like to reflect from your perspective, once you can get that wayward son moving, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. a little bit of activity here. Look, I think the commitment, or certainly for me and my family, was huge. I have 3 kids. We've got a farm. You know, being mum as well as working, it's really tough to get away. However, it was the ability to get away and focus on just me and my learning that actually has the impact. And the ability to go away from sessions and in between think about the learning really carefully, you know, being able to reflect on it. Sometimes you're connecting with others between sessions, you know, and pulling yourself up and noticing different aspects of your own behaviour or being observant of behaviour in others, and then going back to the session again and reconnecting with that learning is where change happens. And I think the commitment to the sessions is absolutely critical. And if you can't commit to the 4 face-to-face sessions, it does become, I can imagine it would be quite tricky to reconnect. So yeah, massive commitment on my behalf and our families, but as Stuart just touched on, it's amazing when you actually are forced to actually step out, how others step up and you cultivate the leadership in others. And I think that that's really important to really think about when you're doing this, when you're thinking about a course such as this. It's an opportunity sometimes to create leaders in others.
Yep, good on you, Mel. And thanks everyone. Thanks all 3 of you for sharing some of those experiences. Folks, we're now going to move to questions you may have. I can see some in the chat already. If you know how to use your hand function, if you wanted to raise a hand and ask a question, I can see some there. There's some around ideal age. There isn't one. I can tell you the youngest person ever to do this program was 23, this was 60. And the median age every year for God knows why is 39. So there's no real age, ideal age. And the reason we say that is because, you know, someone having experience in leadership can come earlier in life or later, and there's no right answer there. Be pretty rare to have too many people around the mid-20s, simply not enough time to accumulate that experience, but we have had 1 or 2. And we still, as you can see, we still thought someone at 60 had a fair bit to offer. So hopefully that gives you some idea there. I think there was some asking about a selection process. So there is an application and interview process. Now, what the interview process might look like could be a little bit different to previous years, but essentially application interview of some description. And then we do a thing we call a readiness check. And we've introduced that only recently. And the reason we do that is that just to make sure people have been through a process, we're asking them to be as honest and open as they can as part of that process. And people are trying, no doubt about that. But perhaps, you know, there's something else going on for them that they haven't raised at either the application or interview that becomes apparent in the readiness check. And that just might mean they're fine and right to go, or actually it's not the right time for them. So that it's sort of a 3-step process. So we obviously open for applications. You've got a closing period for that. We then move to the interview stage, and if you get through that stage, we then go to a readiness check. So that's sort of the process. And yes, you would get feedback if you requested it as part of that. So if you didn't get to interview, you were asking why not, we provide some feedback. If you're interviewed and weren't successful, same thing. We provide feedback on that. So I think that's some of the questions there in the chat. Do people have other questions? And yeah, feel free to raise a lovely yellow hand. Is it Dilhani?
Yes, yeah. Sorry. Yeah, my question is, sorry, I missed the first part. So I would have missed that. You would have actually mentioned about that. What type of time commitment is needed like for this?
Yeah. Yeah, Dilhani, so as we talked about, it's around that from a face-to-face commitment in terms of in session, it's about 45 days over a 15-month period over 4 sessions, if that makes sense. So they're larger chunks of time, right? But fewer times coming together. So it's 4 sessions, totaling about that 45 days over that 4 sessions or thereabouts. And then you have some online seminars. Typically, they're between 90 minutes and 2 hours. So there's 3 or 4 of those. And there is some time in between sessions that you'll work on individually or with a group collectively on either your individual project or some collective work. I wouldn't call any of that onerous. In other words, we're not expecting you to spend loads of time in between sessions. So I hope that gives a bit of an outline, Dilhani, on the sort of time.
Could I ask, like, you said like over 45 days, isn't it?
Around that in terms of the in session. Might be 42, is it, Andrea? I'm probably.
All right. Yeah. So this means like, so we we gather physically as well during that time, is it?
That is that you are absolutely gathering physically. So we'll be bringing people from all over the country to the same location, and that location will move around the place in different sessions. So the first location is in regional New South Wales, the second one's in New Zealand, the third one's in regional Victoria, and the fourth one's in Central Australia.
Oh, okay. Yeah, got it. Thank you. Thanks.
That's okay. Thanks, Dilhani. Katrina.
Hello, I'm just curious what the past attendees, how did they determine what their impact or their project that they were going to be focusing on? How did they get to that point?
So this is only relatively new, not a project by any stretch, but only recently have we had an individual project as well as some collective work. So in the past, that's typically been only the collective work. If you're thinking about this, Katrina, in terms of application, don't get stressed out that you have to have, the perfect project. It's all sorted out. I know exactly what I'm doing. Some of them are at different stages of development, from conceptual to some people are already working on something and that they're wanting to extend that. So there's no right answer there. And you may even put in something in your application, and by the time you do the program, change your mind, right? And that's going to be okay as well. So don't get stressed out about that. What we're looking for, though, is that you've put some thought into somewhere in something where you want to have an impact, that you've done some work towards that, even if you choose to change your mind in the end. So does that make sense in terms of what we'd be looking for there?
Yeah, good. It just takes off that stress that I'm not real clear just yet.
You don't have, yes, it doesn't have to be perfectly formed or having all the answers, but we would be looking for a demonstration that you've thought about it, you've moved some way in that direction, you've got an idea about what it could look like in the future, rather than having to have all the answers up front.
Thank you.
Andrew, did you want to say anything else about the project, individual project, sorry?
No, I think that what you've said covers that, Matt, because I do note that there is a question that relates to that in the application. And so the idea really there, Katrina, is, as Matt said, what is an area, a challenge, something that's emergent in your own community, your industry. You can make it as, narrowed or as wide as you like in terms of an opportunity where you would like to, commit your time, energy, resources to something that will benefit rural, regional, remote Australia. And as Matt said, that will then become refined and developed, over the course of the program.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Katrina. Emily, did you have a question?
Thank you. I did, but you just answered it perfectly. Thank you.
Oh, okay. That's all right. No problem.
Matt, I'm not sure if you can see this question, but I've got a question here. How do you manage accessibility for people with disability or pregnant/breastfeeding people?
Yeah, good question. What would I say? There are elements to, some elements to the program, parts of the program where those with disability and access, obviously could be managed if we know up front, and depending on where we're going, the access in those places where we're going. The first session of the program obviously does get a bit more difficult in terms of that element of it. So it is an outdoor experiential part of the program. And whilst, as we always do, we do pre-health checks with people to see what people's needs are, to see and do whatever we can, the best we can, to make provision for that as part of the program. There could be some elements of that program which, depending on people's health and levels of ability or disability, could make it more difficult. So we do try and make provision, but I couldn't sit here hand on heart and say, we could provide an experience for absolutely everyone, no matter what your ability or disability might be. Andrea, did you want to talk any more about that?
We capture a lot of information from you early on because your information and what you provide about yourself and your circumstances allows us to consider that in our design. So all of that's really, really valuable to help us inform the design. And then, as Matt has noted, we take a group of people through to the second phase of the selection process, which is the readiness call or readiness conversation. And in that, we would really go much deeper into some of the areas that you had identified, whether it be around your physical, your mental, your emotional well-being, and also anything that relates to your children, to your pregnancy, and so on. So the readiness check allows us to go into that a little bit more in depth to ascertain how we can attend to your requirements. And Matt is right, there are some situations that are they're not practical for us to be able to design for. And there's one other thing that's probably worth noting is if you get to the point of signing your contract, a couple of the clauses that are in the contract clearly state that at any time a participant may be required to undertake clearance from a specialist. So not your GP. So a specialist could be, for example, an obstetrician. It could be a psychiatrist. It could be an orthopedic surgeon or somebody who's been looking after an injury. So at any point in time, if we are very concerned about managing any risk to your own well-being and or to the well-being of other people in the program with you, the ARLF will request that you have clearance from a specialist. So sometimes that means that even if we wanted you part of our program, if you were pregnant, we would not be able to because you have not got clearance from your obstetrician. So I think that's just worth noting. We are not always able to design for every single contingency that people might present with.
Yeah, thanks, Andrea. And thanks for the question. It's a good one. Christine.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. It's been great. I guess could you clarify a bit more about the sponsorship in terms of where that comes from and how like an individual is associated with that, say the business or the industry, and including that community sponsorship.
Yeah, thanks, Christine. So look, in an ideal world, we'd have 30 to 35 open scholarships that, we just went through this process and we selected we thought were the best cohort of people to undertake that program at the time. Unfortunately, it doesn't quite work like that, although there are absolutely some open scholarships. So some scholarships are related to particular industries or sectors. So there might be one for the cotton industry or the health sector, or whatever it happens to be. And they are the majority of scholarships that we have available currently. And then we have others that are what we call more open scholarships. So some of them come from corporates like Telstra and Prime Super. And, they are pretty broad in terms of where people might come from, what they're doing. They could be, like you said, Christine, working in a community organisation or whatever it happens to be, and people would be eligible for those, as well as one or two philanthropic sponsors that we have that provide open scholarships. So a couple of more reaches. One of those scholarships, someone has to be from Queensland or the Northern Territory, for instance, but the others would be anyone from across Australia. So typically that's how it works. The majority are tied to a particular industry sector profession, if you like, and we have a handful of open scholarships that are available to just about anyone in rural and regional remote.
That's great. I'm in Queensland. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you.
No problem. Folks, I realise we've reached time, but are there any other last questions that people would like to ask? And help me out here, Hayley, how are we going with answering other ones in the chat?
Yes, so there are a couple, but if we don't get to them now, we'll make sure we answer them in the follow-up email, which will be sent tomorrow. So if you've had any questions, then please don't stress, we will answer them. There was a question around, do you have to live in a rural or regional area to apply for the program?
No, you don't. But really importantly, if you can live in a capital city, but if your focus for either your workplace or whatever happens to be is on rural and regional remote, in other words, let me give an example that's easy. You live in Melbourne, but your entire work is focused on rural and remote health in Victoria. No problems. You could absolutely apply, and we've had a number of people in that situation. I hope that example makes it easy to understand.
And then we've got, this is the only applicant webinar session that we're offering. So if anyone has anything that isn't covered, then please just reach out to us and we can help you as well. And there was one more question, I think. Do you anticipate the demand for this program will increase now government has cut funding for regional leadership programs? And I think this is a Victorian-based question because IE is the leadership Great South Coast.
Yeah, look, I'm aware that unfortunately has been the situation. I think the Victorian state budget from memory. Yeah, look, potentially, and there'll be a range of other factors that will come into play. Last year was a real uptick in applications as well. So look, there'll be a range of factors. Could that be one of them? Yeah, look, it could be. It could be. Any other questions, folks? No? Otherwise, look, really appreciate your interest in your own leadership, your interest in giving back in some way in your leadership now and in the future. I want to thank particularly our panelists. So thanks, Chook, Mel and Stu, for sharing some of your time and insights. Thanks to our wonderful team at the Foundation. Thanks, Hayley, for being the hostess with the mostest, and everyone else who's contributed to today, Andrea and Gemma and everyone else who's on the call. So thanks, everyone. I hope that's been useful in terms of your own decision making, and you know where to find us if you have further questions with regard to this program, and want to wish you a fantastic day and all the best for the future. Thanks, folks.